Okay, now let's turn the attention to the candidates who are the real stars of this show and have them introduce themselves. We're going to give each of them 5 minutes to introduce themselves, and we'll start with CJ Grisham.
I'm gonna stand because I'm a short guy and I want you to be able to see me. Before I even get started, I want to say something very important about tonight, and thank Senator Burton for even holding this event. What we need right now is we need more senators like Konni Burton. We need more representatives like Molly Webb. I'm proud that she's my representative. And the reason I say that is because we need strong-willed legislators that aren't going to bend to the political establishment. The people that you see on this stage embody that promise that they will not bend to the political establishment, that we will not have our campaigns run by the political establishment, and that when we get to Austin, we will not be dictated to on how we will vote on bills. So I wanted to... it's an honor for me to be up here with Dr. Mayes, because to me, the fact that we are here says something, and it should say something to each and every one of you. And I've probably only got 2 minutes left, but my name is CJ Grisham. I am a recently retired Army First Sergeant. Probably many of you know who I am if you're local. I've been in the paper a couple of times. But what I really am is I am a principled, long-standing, liberty-minded conservative. I believe strongly in that document that I took an oath to support and defend over 20 years ago. And that is to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. I took that oath. It's a lifelong oath. It will never go away from me. But now I want to take another oath to support and defend the Constitution of the state of Texas. And I want to make sure that we create a state that, in enforcing our Constitution, force the federal government to abide by their Constitution. When we talk about backbone, we had some great legislation that would have made Texas strong that died because of what I call squishy Republicans. We've had too many of those squishy Republicans in Austin. And quite frankly, this legislative session, I was frustrated and I was angry. And I said, I can either keep complaining about it, I can keep going out there and being a troublemaker on the outside, or I can be a troublemaker on the inside. And so this wasn't something that I ever aspired to. I'm doing this because I believe in liberty. I believe in our constitutional principles. I believe in the founding principles, not only of this state, when we left the Mexican government, but as a country, the liberty that we have here in Texas. We should be the strongest and the freest of all the 50 states. This is the home of Gonzales, the home of the Alamo. This should be the state that leads the country in telling the federal government, no. Your unconstitutional mandates stop at our border. That's where it stops. And as your senator, that's something that I am going to fight very strong to ensure, is that Texas is not dictated to by Washington, D.C., and I'm going to need your help for that, and I thank you for having me today. Absolutely border security. For the last 15 years, I've worked in counterterrorism in the United States Army and with a focus on counterterrorism. And I've seen firsthand what's come across that border. I've seen it from its roots, where it starts in Central and South America. I've seen it from its roots in the Middle East. If you don't think that the enemy knows where our weak spots are, then you're misleading yourselves. Because if we know that we have a border problem, I guarantee you the enemy knows we have a border problem. And it's something that the federal government wants to tell you that we can't fix. That we're not allowed to because it's a federal issue. And quite frankly, this is one of the things that I'm talking about when we talk about the federal government telling states what to do. We have the constitutional authority to protect our borders. It's written right into Article 1, Section 9 of our Constitution. We have that authority to do that. So what we do is a lot of the things that Mr. Mayes already mentioned. We end sanctuary cities. We cease giving any state funds to any city that continues a policy of sanctuary. We end any type of public assistance that is given to somebody who is illegal, no driver's licenses, institute an E-Verify system, and basically make Texas so hostile and uncomfortable for illegal immigrants if they go somewhere else, and eventually the other states will follow suit. I've been looking into this a lot, and there really are a lot, and the problem is they've got their tentacles all over the state. But one of the very first ones that I've noticed that really needs to go away is the Lower Colorado River Authority, or regional, I'm sorry, the LCRA. That would probably be the first thing that I would abolish and try to bring local control back to our water supply. We also have, and maybe I'm just not a smart enough guy, but we have a Department of Banking and a Department of Credit Unions. Why do we need two? I think we can combine them. I don't even know why we need them to begin with. I'm trying to find their purpose, to be honest with you. And so those, just right off the bat, those are some of the ones that I would do. I think I would also like to get rid of printing any materials, any publicly funded signs, papers, anything in any language other than English. I don't think there's a formal pledge out there anywhere, but I have taken upon myself a personal pledge in making this very public. I will not allow a single government lobbying organization, a public sector lobbying organization, into my office. I don't need government coming to government to ask for more government. We need less government. Can you define constitutional? Yeah, obviously I fought very hard for constitutional carry this session. And let me tell you something, that fight is why I'm sitting up here today. Because we had supposedly the most conservative legislature in Texas history. Our state party platform lists constitutional carry as what we are fighting for. It's one of those things that we are supposed to pass. And I couldn't get a total out of 181 legislators. I could not get more than 12 to sign on to a constitutional carry bill. Everyone fought me. Not everyone. There are people in this room that did not. Almost every legislator fought me on that. What does constitutional carry mean? It means if you can legally own and carry a firearm, if you can legally purchase if you can legally own and purchase a firearm, you should be able to legally carry that firearm without begging the government for permission, without paying a $250 tax, without going through a government-mandated training program, without shooting a piece of paper 5 feet in front of you, and typically your guy's going to come at you for. I mean, it's absolutely absurd. And I really would kind of like. I like Ryan. We've talked a couple times, but I really kind of take exception. I don't think police need to be looking at gun owners as the enemy, and that's the problem we have in this state. And I know because I've been a victim of this. When the police force and the government looks at you as an armed citizen as the problem, and looks at you as a potential terrorist, every single one of you first, then we've also lost our Fifth Amendment. We've also lost due process. What I want police officers to do is respect the Constitution. And yes, if you are doing something that leads to reasonable suspicion or probable cause, by all means. But if I'm sitting down enjoying a hamburger and I've got my nice Kimber 45 on my side with pearl handles, leave me alone. And I don't think law enforcement, and this is another reason why I'm standing up here. There was an amendment to the open carry bill that would have expressly prohibited law enforcement from going up to someone lawfully carrying a firearm and demand to see their papers. Their CHL. And that amendment, it passed in the House and it passed in the Senate. And thank you, Molly, and thank you, Connie, for supporting that. But there were 4 words different. One said in a person's possession, and the other said in the possession of a person. And our conservative legislature, this bastion of constitutional rights that we have in Austin, went to a conference committee because they could not agree that means the exact same thing. And that amendment was thrown out, and now law enforcement across the state are telling their cops that if I'm walking down the street with my son, or I'm walking down the street by myself, enjoying a nice Schlotsky's hamburger, no, they didn't pay me to say that, I should not be approached. And I quite frankly take offense to anyone saying that the police have more rights than I do. No. And I never will. No. No.
Okay, that was pretty easy. All right.
The people who aren't here would have different answers. I believe that life actually begins before conception. I believe that we are spirits that are whispered into our bodies at the point of conception by our Father in heaven, that those lives begin right there inside that woman's womb, and that they are holy from the time that they are created and breathed in to the time that they naturally die. And I was listening again to the Democratic debates the other night, and a thought occurred to me. Maybe if we mandated that if we're going to have abortions, that they be committed with firearms, they'd actually care. Because they care a lot about firearms taking people's lives, but they don't care about the lives of our unborn child. And I know that sounds crass, but that's literally what we're doing when we allow abortion. It might not be a firearm, but it doesn't matter if it's a needle, if it's a pill, if it's an incision, whatever that is. Life is precious. I have 3 beautiful children, and another one that I'm sure is up there somewhere. And I know for a fact that when my wife and I prayed about having children, that we knew that they were ready to come down. So if life exists, if we have souls, then life exists at the moment that life is created. And then that needs to be protected not only in the beginning, but in the end stages of life. I know Obama doesn't think that once you've lived 60, 70, or 80 years that your life is worth anything anymore. But I believe your life is worth something until God decides that it's time for you to come home. I don't want law enforcement going around asking people to show their papers by the color of their skin or the color of their eyes or the way they talk. What we need to do is we need to create policies in Texas, as I mentioned earlier, that make Texas completely hostile to illegal immigration. You need a license or some sort of identification to vote, to prove who you are. You need it to get a driver, or to drive a car, to buy a car, to rent a house, to set up an electricity, power grid, whatever. But if you cut off any access to state-funded materials, state-funded programs, state-funded agencies, they're going to go away by themselves. Then obviously, if a law enforcement finds an illegal immigrant through criminal activity, then at that point, that's where we run them through the courts the way we do anybody else. And if they're going to get released after, maybe their sentence is 2 months, well, instead of releasing them, we either send them to New York or California or back to wherever they came from. I adamantly support a Article 5 constitutional convention. I have also researched this till I'm blue in the face. I believe that we cannot rely on the federal government to rein itself in. That is a fact. It cannot happen. People have asked me, well, why don't you run against Jon Carter? Because I don't want to go to D.C. The federal government is broken. It is absolutely broken. It is up to the states. Let me tell you about this is my philosophy of the hierarchy of authority in this country. It begins right where you're sitting right now. That is the ultimate authority. The second authority is your state and then your federal. The people created the states created the federal government. It is up to the states to put the federal government in check. This last election cycle, Republicans finally came into control of an overwhelming majority of state houses, of both chambers in the United States. So if we think that we're going to get a constitutional convention that abolishes the Second Amendment or abolishes this or abolishes that, first thing you have to remember is, even if they did abolish the Second Amendment, it didn't give us that right. We still have the right to keep and bear arms. It just tells the federal government to keep your hands off of it and gives them a warning. But we don't have to worry about that. I am confident that the people in the states, acting as states, can go and create a constitutional convention and come out with amendment processes that rein in our federal government, that require them to have a balanced budget, that require them to follow the Constitution, that return our senators back to us, and let the states actually have representation in the federal government. The 17th Amendment is probably the most bastardized constitutional amendment that we got. It destroyed our states' rights. So it is up to us to go back, create this Article 5 convention, get some meaningful amendments in there. And you know, we've had these conventions in the past, and they've tried those kinds of things in the past. And quite frankly, I think the Bill of Rights, I'm confident, the Bill of Rights is secure. What's not secure is federal government authority and power. I adamantly oppose red light cameras, and you know, here's a headline if there's media here. I've got a red light ticket in Killeen that I have refused to even acknowledge for 3 years. Read those tickets when you get them. That's not going to the state. Those aren't administered by the state. Those are administered by some private company outside of here. And so, you know, here's where I exercise a little bit of civil disobedience. If I get a red light ticket, it goes in the trash. Because there is no legal remedy. Read the bottom of the ticket. It says do not go to court, don't schedule a date. It literally is a contract between you and a private entity. Red light cameras are unconstitutional. I think they're immoral, and I frankly refuse to even care when I get one in the mail. So I would oppose them. I would submit, I would sponsor, I would co-author, I would do whatever it takes to ban red light cameras. I'll tell you who I have talked to, because I'm not a politician, so I didn't even know how to file my paperwork. But obviously, you know, at the risk of sounding like I'm sucking up, the two representatives that are here, Senator Burton and Molly White, I've actually reached out to both. And also Bob Hall, and I'll tell you what, you know, Bob Hall, look into his campaign. That is a true grassroots conservative who went up against the establishment and kicked their tail, paying just a tenth of what their opponents spent. And so obviously I reached out to him because not only is he a conservative hero of mine, but he's also going through what I went through, which is being a poor man trying to win a rich race. And I love Matt Shaheen. Matt Rinaldi is another guy I've reached out to quite frequently. Jonathan Stickland has become a really good friend of mine as a champion in the House. And also Don Huffines to a degree as well. He also took a lot of beating. And let me tell you, this is another reason why I want to get in the Senate, because I sort of felt like, for the most part, because there are so few true blue conservatives, I think, in the Senate. There's a lot of Republicans, but there are so few of the caliber that we need up there. And when Stickland and Huffines were being just beaten to death on the floor and just being treated completely unprofessionally, I mean, I just wanted to scream. Actually, I got told to be quiet a couple times up in the rafters. These kinds of representatives need support, and they need someone to be able to back them up. And we've, like I said, I'm gonna not mention the people in this room because I don't want to puff up their heads or make it sound like I'm sucking up. But I mean, there were people that did that, but there weren't enough that stood up for these kind of people. So those are the ones that I would reach out to just off the top of my head. There is a really good list, and thankfully there's more this time than there was last time, and hopefully there will be more next time than there was this time. I am not a politician. I'm running because I'm kind of fed up with politicians. My wife and I have been stockpiling deodorant and anything we can do to mask the smell of becoming a politician. I'm running because I'm fed up. I'm running because the Constitution means something to me. For my entire life, I have stood up for what is right, sometimes when it's very unpopular. There are some times where I stood up in this area, and they were very unpopular. But what no one can say about me is that I don't have a backbone, that I'm not willing to stick my neck out and do what's right in spite of what the conventional wisdom may tell us. When I was a young sergeant, I recommended my commander for an Article 15. You don't do that as an enlisted soldier. I did that, and I won. I got promoted to platoon sergeant after that. When I was in 2009, after Obama got elected, I had a very popular military blog, and I was very pointed about his policies. As a soldier, you're not supposed to do that. I got in a lot of trouble for that. I stood up and I said no. I told the commanders, as they were trying to tell me to stop writing the truth, that you don't have any authority to tell me to stop writing the truth. I'm not breaking any laws, I'm not breaking any regulations, and I'm not lying about anything. And I won, but I stood up. I have a record and a history of standing up for morals, Christian values, and Christian principles. Even though I was in the federal government, I stood up to the federal government. While I was in Afghanistan, I got in trouble because I was actually talking about how we were not training the Afghan soldiers on protecting the rights of the Afghan people. I wasn't supposed to talk about that. I did that. I've gone in front of 4-star generals to stand up for what's happened here locally about my activism for gun rights and them trying to tell me to stop. And it was very unpopular. And I wasn't making any friends. And quite frankly, I didn't even get a retirement award because of it. But it didn't matter to me. It was right. Standing up for Texas is what's right. And because I have that history of standing up to the establishment, of standing up for our rights, for standing up for our values, you know that when I get into Austin, it's going to be the exact same thing. The last thing that Austin wants is to see me every day. And that's what's going to happen if you put me in there into District 24. I want to go to Austin to serve you, not to be served by you.